You reach out to a prospect in your industry for the first time. The problem is you're brand new to this company, you're brand new to the industry, and you don't know much. Confidence is kind of low. How do you best approach this prospect? Well, I can tell you the way that most of us do it, which is not right. And Jim is going to correct us on that. That's being subservient. You can't do that. You can't do that. Listen why. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. On this episode, we have an amazing guest. Oh my goodness, you're going to love it. It's Jim Vaselopulos. Jim and I had a fantastic conversation. He has a book called Clarity, and we have a link down in our show notes so you can get access to that. But Jim and I were talking about this concept of being subservient and how we need to approach the prospect as a peer, how this helps us to be able to close more deals and to get more opportunities. Listen, it's a fun episode. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, please consider subscribing as well as tell one other person about it. This show is designed to help you to 3 to 5x your sales pipeline and more than double your close rate. The tips and ideas and strategies we give is to help you succinctly, is that a word? Succinctly do that. People are laughing at me in the studio. As we dive into this episode today, I want to make sure you gain a lot from it. So take some notes and apply the stuff. As always, this will only work if you apply it. Check it out. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Donald. It's my pleasure.
I bragged about you a little bit in a teaser, and I would love for you to take a minute and just tell us a little bit more about you and your business and all the fun stuff you guys are doing right now.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to brag on myself. I'm just, a normal dude, been through the ringer, done a lot of stuff, was a reluctant salesperson. I think that might be, interesting for your audience is I didn't ever really want to be a salesperson, but I ended up being one and found a fair amount of success kind of thinking through selling a little bit differently than most.
Why were you a reluctant sales professional?
I just thought most salespeople were slimy when I first kind of got into it. I didn't like, the idea of being a salesperson. I didn't maybe even have the appropriate amount of respect for the skill that went with sales when I was managing and leading, an organization. And it wasn't until I, got into it, carried a bag, learned the craft, understood. And there's a guy by the name of Ford Harding who is kind of the godfather of rainmaking. And he said at the day, I was a consultant. I was someone who offered value. And he said, Jim, sales is the highest form of consulting. It is the most pristine part of the art form. And he explained it to me. And I thought, yeah, I got to really buy into this because he's right. Because when you're selling, you're offering consulting on day one at no cost. And if it's appealing enough, someone's going to want to start paying for it. And so you have to be really good at your craft. And that kind of turned my head and got me down a journey where I needed to understand it. I needed to understand people, psychology, the whole bit. And now I have 180-degree opinion on it. And I just, I embrace the term salesperson. It's something you should wear with pride.
I love it. And I would agree with him on that it's definitely is the highest form of consulting. I never heard it said that way before. I heard sales is consultative, but that makes total sense as you start thinking about it even more so. Well, one of the things that you and I were talking about before, Jim, was this idea of the long-term relationship and coming into this thing as a peer. I know a lot of times sales professionals, and I can tell you for myself, I went into a sales situation where I was subservient, or I saw myself as subservient to the buyer. It depleted my energy and excitement because I was so worried. I didn't get a chance to focus on the value that I was bringing. But there's so many other benefits to this. But I would love for you to talk about what are some of the challenges you see when you don't come in as a peer, and talk to us about what you mean by that for a second. And then we can go into some points relative to it. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I think, one of those things, the more I studied sales, I didn't just get good at it. Like I went in and I wanted to study and understand it. So much of what we do is based on psychology. And I think if you're in sales and you want to be a professional and you have not done the requisite amount of study of psychology, whether it's studying, Kahneman with Thinking Fast and Slow, or Cialdini with, Influence and Persuasion. I mean, these are fantastic books. You're not really getting it. And so, before I even get into the peer thing, I just want to cover one other thing. It's like,
sure,
no one wants to buy from a person who seems desperate. Okay. So desperation is something you always want to avoid in sales. And if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, or I'm not enough and I'm desperate. Desperation is like a stink you can't get off you, and people can sense it and they can smell it. And so it's really hard to sell when you're desperate. Now that adds a whole nother tangent we can take on sales management. But one of the things that shows outwardly your desperation is when you come into a relationship and allow yourself to be subservient in day one. And that comes from a feeling of saying like, I'm not enough. And so you want to go in and say like, well, I'll prove myself. And over time, I'll earn the right to maybe operate as a peer. But, and a lot of people, that's the approach they take. It's like, in time, I'm going to show you that I'm worth it. And then maybe someday we can have a peer relationship that's healthy. And, I always tell people, I say, imagine you have a daughter. And that daughter comes to you and says, listen, there's this important relationship in my life and I'm ready to tell you about it. You go, great, you've met someone special. And they say, yes, I have. He kind of treats me like dirt. Okay. But I think if we get a little more serious and we engage with one another, that someday he'll respect me enough to treat me like an equal. Okay. Now think about that for a second. Would you, I'm putting on the brakes. I'm thinking like, who is this guy? We're going to cut this thing off. I love you, dear, but this is not good for you. Yet in sales, we do that all the time. And so, you might say to your daughter, like, where are you finding these guys? She's like, well, I'm finding in that bar by the tracks, it's like, well, maybe you need to go look somewhere else. So from a sales standpoint, don't look for the wrong audience. Find an audience that will respect you. You're targeting wrong. So target correctly with people that will respect you and enter those relationships as a peer on day one. And then once you build, because in B2B sales, we work for this, we work hard. These things don't happen overnight. You build a relationship sometimes years before it bears fruit. If you have that relationship, the last thing you want to do is take advantage of it as well. Because let's say you develop a peer relationship from the start and something happens and you can take advantage of that client. Because the pricing pressure allows you to, or they get themselves in a spot where they're desperate. If you allow yourself to take advantage of them, that's going to ding the relationship. And the next time they have an opportunity, they may try and claw something back or get back at you or try and equal things out. Well, now you're getting into one of these unhealthy marriages where it's like, well, if you bought your new boat, I'm going to buy this, and that never ends up right. So the reality is what you want to do is when you have those opportunities, recognize them, accommodate them with, a grace and gratitude and nurture that relationship because you're going to say, listen, we're going to get through this and I'm going to help you out. We're going to get through this together. And those relationships will end up being your most profitable relationships because they last, because the sale you don't have to make because it's a repeat sale with someone who already knows, likes, and trusts you is going to be the easiest sale. It's going to have your lowest cost of sales always. And so that's why entering and maintaining peer relationships is such an important part of sales. And it's never going to happen if you start off desperate. And it's never going to happen if you get greedy along the way.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we could shut everything off right there and people walk away feeling like they got tons of value already.
Cool.
But we're not going away yet, Jim. Not yet. But go back to this concept though. Like it's so, like for me, the part, and I told you my story at the beginning. The reason, and when you talk about that relationship, like a teen, like your daughter, it comes back to it's like, yeah, like why would we tolerate that? But why do we go back and tolerate it the same way as a seller? And I think for me, one of the parts was I didn't feel confident in knowledge of the solution that I have, that I had to offer. And I it was more like me catching up. And one of the thoughts as you were going, I thought too, and I've seen this later on, that oftentimes some of the buyers probably have their inferior concept as well. They're like, man, I don't know anything about this IT stuff. I mean, I'm the
Mhm.
the COO, but I do know we have a problem, and this guy knows what he's talking about. But it's kind of, I think the company know what they're talking about, and they see you the subservient. They're like, maybe I can't trust them. Maybe they're wishy-washy, when you probably actually know more than they do, even if you're young in the company or in the industry,
Yeah.
because it's what you do.
Um,
Am I making sense on this?
I'm going to drop something on you now that is
Let's
probably
go.
even,
Ooh.
I'm sorry, cut you off.
No, I said,
I'm
let's
going to
go.
drop something
I'm
on
getting
you that's
excited.
probably even more powerful. Good. That's even more powerful than the first thing we spoke about. And that is,
Okay.
a lot of times we think we need to know a lot about the solution, and we like to talk about our solution. And, people will hire new salespeople to be like, we got to put this person through months and months and months of training, or even weeks of training. And I'll say, if you want me to sell what you've got, I need about 45 minutes. Okay. And it's not that I'm going to be ignorant or anything like that, but a lot of times ignorance is your friend, because really your best tool as a salesperson is to ask questions. It's not to make statements. And if you want someone to think you're smart and respect you, all you need to do is ask a timely, good question. And sometimes it could be as simple as like, that's interesting. Why'd you decide to do that? And get them talking. And when someone tells to you, Donald, that's a great question, they're saying, they're giving you a tremendous amount of respect. They're saying, you're smart like me. And so the most powerful thing you can do as a salesperson is not to articulate or even explain your solution. It's to get people to feel like you understand their problem as well as they do. So when you can get someone to say like, hey, what's the problem you're having? Because think about it. They're like, I don't even understand this IT stuff. They don't. But guess what? They totally understand the problems they have with regard to the fears they have. Like, do you know if you're spending enough or too much on IT? Where do you think you are? He's like, I don't know. I have no idea. Great. So you're getting into budget meetings, I'm guessing. And, you're like, I don't even know if we should authorize this or not. It's like, exactly. So now we're tracking on the problem. I'm asking questions. They're answering it. And we're getting closer and closer to this feeling like, you get me, dude, Donald, you understand where I am. And once I have that with you and you feel like we are kindred spirits right now, like this guy totally gets me, you will buy just about anything I've got. Okay. It's very powerful. It's kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's super powerful. It's this Jedi mind trick. Now, you can use that for good or for bad. If my product sucks or if it's not going to solve the problem, I'm completely unethical if I pursue this any further. But if I truly believe in my product or service that it can solve your problem, I don't need to explain how it works. I don't even need to understand how it works. I just need to know that what I have will solve the problem you've got. And the way you're going to trust me on that is by me articulating the problem in such a way that makes you vividly feel like you get me.
Oh my goodness, the last part there, you can take that, pound for pound, like that there is truth, some big truth bomb. And let me go back and explain, like, if to folks listening, think about it like from the doctor standpoint. Sometimes the doctors don't necessarily tell you right out the gate. You come in the office and they say, hey, well, this is a solution, but they describe the problem. They start asking you questions about symptoms that you have. And you're like, holy moly, were you there yesterday? Like, how do you know that part of my leg hurt when I told you my shoulder?
Yeah.
Because this person truly understands the problem. They've studied it out. And that brings a whole bunch of validation.
Yep.
So then therefore, whatever you say after that point, Jim, I'm like, take the money, because you know what I'm going through. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the big mistake we make in sales, which is why even in sales, like sometimes they have this thing called the dummy curve, where we say like, hey, the new guy starts selling like right away. And it's like amazing because he doesn't know anything. So all he knows is to ask questions. And then, a few weeks later, he or she goes through training and they learn all about the product, and they, spend all this time learning about the product. They can't shut up about the product, and they stop asking questions. They start making statements, and then they can't sell. Really, you need to be armed with just a heavy dose of curiosity, which is why I always say, if you're hiring salespeople, you need to hire people who are already predisposed to being curious, because their natural state is going to be asking questions. And so I've got a whole kind of methodology I tell people to use when they're interviewing salespeople, because I can teach you just about anything. but it's hard for me to teach you to be curious. So I'm always trying to ferret out in that interview, are you curious naturally? And if you are, then that's really great raw material to work with.
How do you identify that though, if somebody is curious or not?
So, I mean, I'll throw out a little trick here for anyone listening who hires salespeople. I'll usually tell people like, hey, Donald, there are 3 things you need to be successful in our company. And I'll say, thing number 1 is blank. I'll tell a little story. And then thing number 2 is this. And I'll tell a little story or give an example. And then I will move on to some other piece of the conversation. Okay. Yeah. And I'll just completely ignore number 3. Now, a great salesperson takes note, like, I need to know number 3. Like, you didn't give me number 3. If they interrupt me right away, but they want to know number 3, I know they're curious, but I also know they're not that experienced or not that mature yet because they didn't know to patiently wait. If they sit there and they come back and they say, hey, Jim, thanks for that other little story. That was really fascinating. I want to circle back to something you said earlier. You said there were 3 things. The first thing was this. Second thing was this. What's that third thing? If they come back in that fashion, that's a pro. That's someone I'm interested in.
I love that. Look at that, y'all. Man, Jim over here dropping all kinds of value on y'all. This is just like it's the first 15 minutes. We still got 5 minutes to go.
Sweet. Let's get some more out there.
There's so much with this already. Like, again, come into this idea of the peer. You don't need to know everything. And then this idea of just being curious, like being a naturally curious person that can help us as the individual contributor, but also from a sales leader standpoint, identifying individuals that have that characteristics to that level of curiosity. Now, I want to go back to maybe you don't mind if we do a role play scenario here. I mean, I can be the buyer, you can be the seller, but let's go to that idea of behaving like a peer towards me. I'm an executive at an organization, and maybe let's use that IT example again. I would love for us to just play with that. And guys, Jim and I didn't practice any of this. So
no, not at all.
Yes. But we're just playing here. But I really want you all to see how natural this can work. But if I'm the buyer, you're the seller, you're inexperienced, how could you come as a peer towards me from the opening of the conversation? Do you mind role playing something like that?
Yeah, not at all. Am I selling a service or a product?
Let's go with service.
Okay.
Say IT managed services.
IT managed services, great. Donald, I understand, we got together today and I'm glad we're together for some time. I know you're looking for, perhaps something we've got, don't know, but, for us to kind of keep the conversation short and effective for you, I know you're a busy guy. What are the things that are your biggest challenges right now? And, if I can help you, I'll let you know. If I can't, maybe I'll refer you to someone I know.
Yeah, well, you guys mentioned some stuff on your, when we connected on LinkedIn, you talked about, IT related budgets. Definitely something's piqued my curiosity. We have an internal IT staff right now, but this year has been rough and a little bit more unpredictable with our revenue. I'm looking for ways that we can augment that kind of cost.
Yeah, are you guys getting pressure on keeping your budgets flat? Are you decreasing them? And where's that pressure coming from?
Yeah, CEO had board meetings, and I think we need to look for some cuts across, but I really don't know what to cut or where to cut when it comes to the IT standpoint. And I don't want to give a red flag, send up an alarm to my IT folks. Yeah, have them run to the hills,
Have they given you a specific kind of amount? Is it just like cuts in general, or are they saying like we need to get 25% or something like that?
Across the board, we have to cut about 15 across the org.
15%? That's pretty rough. Are you going to be able to do that with outside services or with people? Or, this is probably going to hurt. Tell me about that.
Yeah, definitely it's going to be an impact towards our internal team. I know we're going to have to, let go of some folks. And I think outside could help if we can find services that can do it a little bit inexperienced, but still obviously maintaining the quality that we need to maintain for our customers.
Yeah, just out of curiosity from a business standpoint, is the company declining in revenues, or is it increasing in revenues while these cuts are happening?
We're seeing a little bit of increase, but to be safe, we're coming up on political season. We don't know what to expect. So we just want to be a little bit more prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's it's a problem I think other people are having as I talk to my clients. This is not uncommon. And so this is a problem a lot of people are facing. One way to address that, I'm not saying it's the only way, but one way to address that is to outsource some of your services. And that way, instead of having an FTE around doing something, you can just take what you need, and you can also manage it and throttle it appropriately as you see fit. But you're kind of in a pickle, and I understand that. And tell me if I'm wrong. When you've got a company that's still increasing, so the demand on your services isn't decreasing, it's just you got to do more with less, which is kind of rough.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. Definitely a piece that we're coming upon, and yeah, we just need some help with that.
Yeah, let me ask you this. I mean, I don't know what your time frame is. I don't know what you're looking for. I certainly believe that our firm can help you, and I'm interested in helping you because you seem like a good guy, the kind of person that I do well with. I don't want to spend my time working with people who, aren't fun to deal with, and you seem like a fair guy. What's the best way for a guy like me to work with you to help you? I mean, you're in charge. You tell me.
Well, I think maybe if you guys, maybe we can look at some of your offerings and see what we can, what could help us, what you could do for us, and when it comes to outsourcing or some of your outsources services, and then show you what we're working with, what we have, and some of the things we feel that we may be able to adjust. And if that makes sense, price is right. We can move forward.
Okay. So right now I'm going to take a break out of the role play, and I'm just going to say, like, right now, the really key statement is going to happen, because I'm not going to talk about managed services. I'm going to talk about the real problem he's got. Okay.
Yeah.
And say, Donald, that's really cool. And usually what we would do in a situation like this is like come in and do an analysis to see like where we can help. But it sounds like your people don't know about this yet, and you're not sure you want to kind of spread that word. What do you recommend the best way to do this so that we can kind of assess the situation appropriately with you without kind of spooking your team, so you have the time to kind of assess, what the right strategy is? I mean, it might not be using us, but what I don't want to do is, come in and spook everyone, and then you don't, everyone, you start losing people. That's the last thing we want to do. I mean, I think that's the real problem we need to work through. I think, I just want to be mindful to, all the complexity of everything you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to ideas. I've never been in a position like this, Jim, so it just makes it a little more challenging. Sounds like you guys have been down this path before, and maybe some options that you guys see that we can work to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll kind of end the role play right now, but what I'll say is, like, I didn't talk about managed services at all. We talked about the problem. And then we talked about the problem that was kind of not mentioned, that's like, gosh, how am I going to pull this? I don't even know what to do next. And then you said, like, I'm not even sure I know what to do next. You've kind of been there, done that. And it's all a business discussion. But when it's a business discussion and you talk to someone as a business peer, talking about the real problems they're having, not like the thing they ask you for, not what they, said they want, but what they need. And that is really when you can make great strides. And, granted, I do have some history in this business, so it's not like I didn't understand what you were doing, but like, I think someone could have followed along and not had any history in IT managed services and been just fine.
Yeah. I agree with you there. And I feel like when you came back to the point where you're talking about the real issue, the issue beneath the surface, I felt that's where, like, obviously the money was at, because we were having, one, you're helping me on a human level. Let's go back to the full circle where you talked about psychology at the beginning, but then also two, it also helped me to be able to trust you, to say, this guy, go back to your role play early on when you're doing the interview, right? You're a true sales professional. You heard a problem that I didn't articulate was a major problem. And you made mention of that. So all of those things helped me to feel comfortable as a buyer to say, all right, they seem like they know what they're talking about. Let's go to the next step. And yeah, if we need to, we can bring a technical person in at that point. But you clearly understand that we know your problem, and we can move forward with that. So
yeah.
I like this. As a peer, see them as the peer. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
This is really good, man. Jim, if there's one major piece of advice you want folks listening to this episode to walk away with, you got sales leaders listening to this, individual contributors trying to figure things out. What's that one major piece of advice?
We've given a lot of stuff here. I'll give you something a little bit new.
Sure.
We're always trying to minimize in the B2B world two things: cost of sales and lifetime account value. And if you don't know what your cost of sales is, you could be pursuing something, things that are just like, they're not efficient. You're spending way too much energy to get every dollar in the door. And so you got to be managing your cost of sales, and you can't manage it if you don't track it. The other one is lifetime account value, especially in B2B sales. If you don't really think about that vividly all the time, you could end up in negotiations where you're bickering over $5,000 or $10,000, and the cost to replace that client is $70,000 or $100,000. And so it's like we get into these situations where if you don't know those two things, you can end up making a lot of stupid decisions. So I just encourage people to be very aware of those two metrics, because a lot of times we track like, in sales, we're tracking a number of phone calls or this and that. It's just like, no, yeah, that's kind of tactically important, but strategically important: cost of sales and lifetime account value.
I love it. I love it, man. This is so good. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. If people want to get connected to you, want to learn a little bit more about you and what you guys are doing, what's the best way for them to go about doing so?
So I've got this long last name that's hard to spell, so it's hard to find me on LinkedIn. I've got a company name that's kind of goofy.
How do you pronounce it?
Vaselopulos. Okay.
Vaselopulos.
Yeah. A little bit Greek. And and I've got a company name that most people get wrong and spell wrong, Rafty Advisors. So we made it easy on everyone. Go to businesswisdom.com. If you go to businesswisdom.com, you can find about my book, my podcast, my company, everything I do.
We can do that. That's a lot easier to roll off the tongue.
It does. Yeah, indeed.
We'll put it in the show notes. Jim, thank you for coming on the show today. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Donald. This was awesome. This is fun. And the role play in a podcast, never done that before, but I will tell you that was genius. Love it.
I appreciate it, man. Oh my goodness. That was Jim. That role play was ad hoc. We just made that sucker up on the spot, but the principle was great, right? You see how fun it is? Like when you apply this, and especially the part on the interviewing as a sales rep, just that natural curiosity side is just so dope, so important. Listen, if you enjoy this, please go ahead and connect with Jim. You can find information about him down below, as well as our sponsors. They have some great info down below you can take advantage of. I highly recommend you do it. Listen, if you haven't done so already and you're interested in one of our programs, such as our LinkedIn prospecting course or our sales mastermind, I got some links down below as well. We want to help you. If you just need to practice these things, our mastermind is designed in a way that sales professionals come every month. They get the practice, they get the training, they get the guidance, the coaching they need, and it just fuels you and helps you to be more accountable and accomplish your goals. It's not a training program, but our mastermind dedicated specifically for sales professionals. Let me know if you're interested. Find information down below at thesalesevangelist.com/mastermind. As always, I want you to thrive. I want you to succeed. But most importantly, I want you to raise your level of thinking. I want you to go out, double that close rate, and do big things. See you in the next one.